Aloha, art students! Alright, I hope you're ready and excited to create the waterfall landscape that is inspired by the artist J.E.H. McDonald. And this project focuses on art from Canada as well as line, movement, and texture. Okie dokie, let's talk about a few things before we get started on the guided lesson. Now, you should have learned a little bit about the artist James Edward Hervey McDonald, who was part of the group of 7. So, J.E.H. McDonald was born in England, but then he immigrated so that means he moved to Ontario, Canada at a very young age. He began to study art at the age of 14 and even eventually started going to work as a commercial designer. Eventually, he left that job, and as a designer, to further get some more skills under his belt, he decided to try out landscape painting. Then McDonald, he actually happens to be one of the founding members of Group of 7, which is a group of artists that created art based solely on Canadian landscape. The Group of 7 is considered to be responsible for the first major Canadian art movement. So remember, he's from Canada. All right, we're going to talk about what supplies you're going to need because we will be making a waterfall landscape that's going to use a couple different things. Now remember, you can easily do this project with crayons. You can easily do the project with markers. Or you could do the project with, what do you think? Colored pencils. For the black that you need, if you don't have the specific supplies for the project, remember you can always use a black marker, a black crayon, colored pencil, pen, okay? So there's lots of different ways that you can accomplish the project and still make sure that you have all of the elements of the project for a full grade. Now for this specific project, let's talk about the supplies you're going to need. Okay, so for our waterfall project, you're going to need oil pastel. Remember, you definitely want to make sure you have that black. As you can see, we use quite a few areas with the black. You're going to want, what do you think? A water cup and a paintbrush. And then, of course, you're going to want to have some watercolor paint. So remember, this project can be done with other materials, and you don't necessarily have to use oil pastel or paint. Remember, if you don't have oil pastel, you can always substitute with crayon. You just have to make sure when you use crayon to press firmly down on the paper, and sometimes you even have to go over the lines more than once because we're doing another crayon resist or watercolor resist, which means we paint the watercolor over the pastel, which is oil based, and crayons have wax in them, so then if you paint over the crayons, it should have a similar concept of coming through the paint. Okay, and then of course the last thing you are going to need is, yes, a white colored piece of paper. I highly recommend thicker paper so that if you are painting, it's not going to bleed through or rip the paper because it's too wet. If you're not painting, then regular white paper, even copy paper, works for this project. Okay, here we go. Let's get ready to rumble. All right, go ahead and get that white piece of paper and find yourself a black pastel or black pen, black crayon, etc. And come on back once you have your paper and your black writing utensil, and we will get started on this project. Alrighty, welcome back. So on the assignment page, I did include a copy of the direction breakdown in case you want to have a printout or you want to have it up on one of your devices while you're watching and listening to me so that you have another instruction to help you. Remember, at any time you can stop and pause the video, as well as remember you can do different chunks of a project at different times. You don't have to sit and do the whole thing at once. However, this project doesn't take as long as some of the others, so hey, maybe you may be okay to just do it in one setting. It's totally up to you and how you feel. So I'm going to go over the directions and then I will visually guide you through the different steps. So number 1, we're going to draw a horizon line across the paper, and it's going to be near the top of the paper, and it can be a little curvy, okay? So we don't have to make it perfectly straight. Next, number 2, we're going to draw a few of those bumpy lines, and those are going to be the tree tops. So imagine you're taking a picture of this waterfall and you are only capturing the top parts of the trees because you're trying to get all of the picture of here of the waterfall and the rocks, and then the mountains and trees maybe in the background. And you're going to want to overlap, so that means putting something on top of something else. Step 3, draw a line with a gentle curve under the horizon line. So we have our horizon line, but number 3, we're adding another line. This one is a little bit closer because, as you can see, when you go to the next steps, you're going to see some more of those horizontal curvy lines. So number 4, add more lines. The lines should be closer together at the top and further apart at the bottom. So let's count how many lines. We have 1 for the horizon line, 2, 3, 4. So you should have about 4 lines. And look at the spacing, right? Remember, it says towards the top of the horizon line, the spaces between the lines are smaller, and then as you go down, they get a bit wider or further apart. Next, you can see how you're going to draw the waterfall starting at the horizon line, and the waterfall should get wider towards the bottom. So you're going to start a little bit thin, and you're going to draw a curvy line, leave some space because this is where the water's going to go, and then draw the other line. Notice we did not go over the treetop lines. You stop when you get to the treetop. And maybe you want your waterfall to go a different way. Maybe you want to offset it and put it more to the left or more to the right. That's fine. It doesn't have to be necessarily straight down the middle. And then we have number 6. And remember, this is just the guide for drawing, not coloring or painting or any of that. Add a zigzag or curved line above the horizon line for the tree line. So your tree line, or maybe you have mountains in the distance, something like that. So you're just adding this line. Okie dokie, we are going to do part 1 of the project. Okay, so this is going to focus on these steps, the ones we just went over, and we're going to be drawing the waterfall. So go ahead and make sure your paper is vertical. That means straight up and down like a door. Go ahead and get your pastel ready. Now sometimes, I don't know about you, but I can be a little tough and rough on my pastels, so they break a little bit easily. And that's fine. You can still use all the pieces. You just, rip the labeling off, kind of like you would with a crayon. Okie dokie. Let's get our handy dandy instructions. Boop, boop. Number 1, we're going to draw that horizon line towards the top. Remember, when you're doing your pastel, you want to press firmly down onto the paper. And sometimes it's even better to go right over that line so it's dark and nice and thick. So when we paint over it, it will work quite well. So you're putting that line. Next, we're going to move to step 2. Remember, that's drawing your tree tops. And you're going to do bumpy lines, and some of them are going to overlap. So you can start on one side, and you're going to want to, create the tops of the trees by doing some curvy, bumpy lines. And remember, I like to go over my lines more than once. You want to do some overlapping. So remember, one thing on top of the other so it looks a little bit more 3D. And maybe you want more than 3 treetops. That's fine. You go ahead and add how many treetops you would like, but make sure you have at least 3, okay? Now, once you've done that, we're going to move to step 3, where we're going to add that other curvy horizontal line, and we're going to have just a small space in between. Same thing, boom, all the way across. I like to go over my lines. And remember, you can pause the video, right, and take your time while you're drawing, and then you just unpause it when you've done a step. Next, we're going to do step 4. So remember, we counted, we needed 4 lines. The next 2 lines are going to be further apart because we're going from small to big, because we want to give the illusion of movement, and we do that by using line, okay? We're going to go across. Go ahead and make your curvy-ish line across. Go over it on the way back. And then we're going to add that one more. Boom. And remember, you don't have to copy, the exact curves that I'm making. Go ahead and make your own version. Perfect. Double check. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 lines, and you have at least how many? Yep, 3 treetops, okay? Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to do step 5. Remember, that's draw a waterfall starting at the horizon line. That's the very top line where the sky and the land meet. The waterfall should get wider towards the bottom. See how it starts off smaller or thinner, and then as we go down to the treetops, it gets a bit wider. If you want to make your waterfall go off once, off to a side, then that's fine. Don't have to make it perfectly down the middle. So I'm going to start, and remember, I'm going to stop at the tree line. Don't want to go over the tree line. And I'm going to go from smallish or thinner, and I'm going to widen out as I get down. And I want to make sure I stop at the tree line. Leave some space. Go ahead and start the other line. Boom. And cross. And stop at that tree line. Okay, we're almost done with the drawing. Alrighty, now we're going to make the tree line. Okay, so we have this line. You can make it a little bit different, right? You're going to use kind of like a zigzag motion of the line. Maybe you want some of it coming off the page. Maybe you want it rounded a little bit more and it's not as jagged. That's up to you, okay? And then remember, go over your lines and really press down. So now I have my tree line. Okay, that is part 1. How simple was that, right? Okay, so here's where you can decide to pause, take a break. You can come back and do part 2, or you can stay on, and we're going to work on adding the movement and detail. So this is where we're going to add some of the colored pastel. So you're going to want to grab your colored pastels. Definitely want to make sure you get some blues, some greens. And then notice we're going to add some details for like the rocks or the sides of the mountain that the waterfall is going down. So we're going to need some browns and some blacks again. And then we're going to do the tree toppers. And you want to think, do I want like a fall tree toppers? Do I want it to be like those reds and orange and yellows? Or do I want more of like a spring, summertime, which is, your bright greens, and maybe you have some trees that have, jacaranda trees that are those beautiful purplish blue colors. So go ahead and grab your container of colored pastels. If you don't have colored pastels, remember you can use other things like crayons, markers, colored pencils, etc. So we're going to do part 2, adding movement and details. Okie dokie. Ooh, I'm so excited. I think this project is super fun and very satisfying. Okay, first thing first. Go ahead and grab your green. I like to play around with the different hues or the different types of green. So I have kind of like a regular / darkish green. I have a light green, and then I believe, yep, I even have a neon green. So it's fun to have those different elements in there, and it's not just like one type of green. And what you're going to do is you're going to kind of make some jagged vertical zigzag lines kind of down the edges of your tree line or your mountain line, whatever you're going to do there. And so I'm just going to kind of push it vertical, so straight up and down. It's a little bit diagonal, and that's fine. And you can play around with your different greens, okay? And you're going to want to do that for all the spots. Okay, remember you can pause the video if you need to. That's totally fine. Do it at your own pace. Okay, once you're done with that, you're going to go ahead and grab a blue, any kind of blue. Again, I like to have multiple types of blues if possible, because it really gives your artwork a bit more of a pop when you're adding different colors into the mix. I love, love, love having multiple shades of a color, okay? So next, you're going to use the blue oil pastel. So pick a blue. And you're going to draw vertical lines inside the black lines to give the illusion of movement to the water. You're going to do short, slightly curved lines that fit in each section of the waterfall. Do not, again, do not draw lines all the way from the top to the bottom of the waterfall. That means you're not fully completing the line. So if we look at my example, notice that I have my movement, but I did not necessarily complete the line from top to bottom. And you need to draw the lines in one section of the waterfall at a time to really give that illusion of movement. So you can go ahead and grab a blue, and you can make your lines. And you can go ahead and mix your blues up if you'd like. I think that's fun. And you're going to want to make your curvy lines, right? Because we're giving the illusion. So we're making it look as if the waterfall is moving, okay? And remember, I told you I kind of like to play with my different shades of blue. So go ahead and do that. Once you have added your movement to your waterfall, go ahead and come back, and we will do the next step. Perfect. So I got all my movement, and I played around and added all the 3 different blues that I had to give it a little more extra oomph to my project. Now go ahead and grab one of the blues. And we're just going to put a few little jagged lines next to some of the green lines to give it some extra depth and dimension. So just a little bit, okay? You don't have to do a lot of the blue, just a teeny tad, just giving it a little extra pop there, okay? All right, now we're going to move on, and we're going to start adding kind of like these curved lines with some of our black and brown pieces, and that's going to kind of give it a little bit of a 3-dimensional rocky look, because you're looking at the waterfall, right? And a lot of times it's going over the side of a cliff, or there's some kind of rocky mountain element. So that's what we're going to do with the black and brown. So grab your brown and grab your black. Okay, and I'm going to start adding some of those. So draw curved lines with brown and black pastels in the rocks to the left and the right of the waterfall. The lines, so you're going to want to curve them, and you're going to want to kind of use like the L shape or maybe a C shape to kind of mimic that smoother, rounder texture of a rock. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add some of those elements. And you don't have to copy me exactly, right? You can kind of decide where you want to put some of those. And you're going to want to use black and brown. And it's okay, you know, to kind of go from the top to the bottom of the line. That's fine. You can definitely do that. You can make some of them, you know, thicker. You can make them not perfectly vertical for the curve, right? You can kind of do them in a different way. That's fine. Get your creative juices going. Okay. Once you're done adding those elements, we're going to move on to the final step. So go ahead, add those rocky elements with your blacks and your browns. Then come on back and we will talk about how to add some movement and texture to the tops of the trees. Wonderful. Now we're going to do the final step for part 2 of the project. As this final step, you're going to use several colors of oil pastel to add bumpy lines inside the trees at the bottom of the page. You want to make sure that you add that leafy texture component. You can choose to use only, you know, the spring, summer times of those green colors for the trees, and maybe they have some flowers on the trees, or maybe the trees are like jacaranda trees, which are those really pretty purple trees. Or you can think about right now how we're in autumn and fall, and we have those beautiful reds, yellows, and oranges on the tree. So go ahead and grab the colors of pastel that you're going to use for your tree tops. So I'm going to stick with fall because I just love fall. It's very beautiful in my opinion. I love all the colors. And remember, you can play around with the different shades. So maybe you have, you know, some really bright oranges. You're going to want to grab, maybe you have like a bright red. And got some yellow, because I'm doing the fall, right? My reds, oranges, and my yellows. And we're going to draw some of those bumpy lines. But you're not going to do like a solid line we did for the top. You're going to do kind of like these smaller sections of bumpy curved lines to really get that sense of movement or motion on the tree. So go ahead and grab one of your colors. And you go ahead and make some of those little textured, bumpy lines for your tree tops. You can make little ones. Totally up to you. I like to kind of combine 2 of them, so I'll go in with another version of it, of my fall colors, and I'll throw some of those little curvy lines next to the ones I already made. So go ahead and add your texture to the rest of the tree tops, and then come on back and we'll do part 3 of the project. So after the tree tops, you'll end with part 2, and then you can decide, hey, maybe I want to take a break and come back and do the painting part last or at a different time. Alrighty, go ahead, add those texture movement pieces to the tree tops and come on back once you're done. Welcome back. So you have just completed part 2 of this waterfall project, which was the adding the movement and the details using your pastels, okay? So next, you can go ahead and put those pastels to the side because we don't need them anymore for now. Go ahead and grab your watercolor, your water, and your paintbrush. And we're going to start doing some of the painting work. Now remember, again, pause the video if you need to stop or if you need to catch up, whatever it is, you can always pause the video, do what you need to do, and then continue. Also, Remember, I've said multiple times, you can complete this project with other supplies if you don't have paint, like crayons, color pencils, markers, etc. But you're still going to need to have all the elements of the project. So it will need to be completed. You can't leave any of the areas incomplete. Okie dokie. Now we're going to move on to one of the fun parts, painting the waterfall. So if we're looking at this guided painting, notice how we're going to paint in different sections. So you see we're going to start with painting of the waterfall. Then we're going to move to painting the rocky elements. Then we'll do the tree tops, and then the tree line or mountain line, whatever you created, in the sky. Then we're going to talk about how we can add that bubbly white texture to the waterfall so it looks like it is, why can't I think of the word? Water spray. There we go. So it looks like it's a water spray when the waterfall is crashing down, right? Okay. Go ahead and gather your paint supplies. Make sure you got that cup of water. You got your paintbrush. I like to have a little paper towel next to me so I can wipe off anything extra that I don't want on my paintbrush. Get those things and come on back. Okie dokie. Yay, welcome back. Okie dokes. I'm super pumped to do this part. So to help give the waterfall some of that moving feeling where the water is moving, right, going down, you're going to paint each section of the waterfall individually. You're going to start from the bottom sections, and you're going to paint a layer of, your blue, and you're going to use the paintbrush going upward. So you're going to go in an upward motion, and remember, you're painting each section at a time. You're not painting the whole waterfall, otherwise the movement effect will not work the way it should. Okay, it won't give you that movement illusion. You're going to continue across the section, leaving the tops, so this area of the section, white. So you're going to kind of stop your paint when you get towards the top of each of the sections. And then you should be able to see some of the brush strokes, which are going to give you some movement. You don't have to blend them in perfectly. So if we look at my example, see how I have a little bit of white at the tops because it's giving you that water spray, right? Because this is moving down the rocks or the mountainside. Go ahead and get your paintbrush wet, and you're gonna put it in your blue. And remember, you're doing one section at a time. So I'm gonna start at the top, and remember, you're painting from the bottom up, but you're not going all the way to the top, right? You want to leave some of that white there for that water spray effect. Same thing, go to the next section. You paint directly over. Okay, leaving some white at the top, right? Now, if you're using marker or crayon, you might have to, you might not be able to go directly over the crayon. You might have to, color around it, and that's fine. So go ahead, push your paint up. Remember, you can pause the video and do this if you'd like, and you don't, have to do it as fast as I'm doing it. Brush strokes going up, right? And then I move to my last section. Same thing, I got my blue, starting towards the bottom, pushing up, and I'm leaving, right, some of those white areas for that water spray look. And then my brush strokes don't have to be super blended in, nor do they have to be perfect, right? Because we're giving that texture, that motion element. All right, go ahead and finish that part and come on back, and we will work on the rock element. All right, so I'm cleaning my paintbrush now, and I'm, gently, gradually wiping the edge of my paintbrush off. I don't like to tap on the water cup because it sprays everywhere and it can potentially ruin your really hard work. So always make sure that when you clean your brush, you kind of do that gentle scrape along the edges to get any excess water. And you can always dab it on your paper towel or napkin, whatever you're using, if you have way too much on. So next we're going to add dimension. So that means we want to make it look more 3D, realistic in a way, and not flat. And you're going to add dimension to the painting, and you're going to try your best to use 2 colors of each section instead of just one flat color. So if you just use brown, it's going to give your painting a very flat look. It's not going to add an element of dimension or texture to it. So you want to use at least 2 colors. For example, you can, when we get down to the trees, you can paint the top half of the tree, you know, maybe your red, and the bottom half orange, and then you blend it together. So here I did the top half orange, and then I added red, and I tried to blend those elements together. When you're doing your rocks, you know, you can use a light brown on one part of the rock, then a dark brown on the other half of the rock, and you can blend it in. Now, to get your really dark brown, remember you can add a little bit of black into it if you want. I also, to get a light brown, instead of adding white, I did yellow to give it more of kind of like a warm feeling. And I did actually throw in a little bit of red and blended that into my rocks. So I'm going to show you how to do the rocks just a little bit, because I want you to go and try and do the rest of the rocks without my 100% guidance, because we have been doing art for a couple months now, hopefully. So we should be pretty good at trying to do stuff on our own. Now remember, I told you I added some of those reds and yellows, oranges to my rocks. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to get some yellow, and I'm going to do some lighter areas. And I'm just going to kind of, you know, place the yellow around. Doesn't have to be perfect. And I want to kind of put it towards the top, but you know, this is up to you. Wherever you want to do that is fine. You know, maybe you want to put it directly over some of those black lines or brown lines. Maybe I want to throw in a little red, give it some of that warm look, or you can do the orange, right? That's a warm color that can also give you some warm elements. And then you're going to go ahead and, you know, grab your browns and work on painting in the rest of your, rocky portion. So remember, you're going to want to try your best to use more than one color to really give your project some dimension, some 3D kind of elements. And it's really going to make your picture pop off the page and not so flat. So go ahead and finish the rocks, and then come on back and we will work on doing the trees, the tops of the trees, and the sky. Remember, throw in a couple different shades, right? Your browns, your reds. You can throw in some oranges and some yellows. Finish up this rocky part, and then come on back and we'll do the next step. Okay, so hopefully you had some fun doing your rocks and you threw in some of those different colors. Remember, the directions said you need to have at least 2 different colors when you're going to do the painting, because you want to make it have that dimension, that depth, your 3D, not so flat look. Before we move on, let's go ahead and double check our rocks and make sure you don't have any little white spots, or you need to maybe blend some more areas in, like I have a little bit there. I got a little white spot there, and I'm always making sure I'm completing the project. I don't want to do all this work and then, you know, not get all of the spots. We always want to make sure that our picture is completed with all of our different elements. And when I was painting, I tried to do different motions with my paintbrushes, so I didn't just go, you know, flat, vertical, up and down, or horizontal, side to side, but I actually, you know, tried to do some more motion or movement with my paintbrush by, you know, kind of doing that curvy look to it. You can do some dabbing, which we're going to talk about later when we add the water spray component. But you can always kind of play around with, you know, how you apply the paint. There's lots of different ways to use a paintbrush. Doesn't have to be, you know, one specific way. Okay, so remember a little bit ago we talked about the trees. So again, with the treetops, you're going to want to use at least 2 colors and blend it in. So I'm doing my fall colors, so I'm going to stick to, you know, my reds and my yellows and my oranges. And I'm going to remember I can paint directly over the pastel because it's oil based and water and oil don't mix. So if I paint directly over, the pastel should come through. And sometimes you need to add a little bit more water to the pigment or the color, the watercolor you're putting on, so that it's not so dark that you can't see the pastel. So you don't make it super thick. Sometimes it just doesn't work. If you're noticing right away that it doesn't work, stop and go over your lines again to make them thicker. Remember, you want how many? 2 colors per tree. So I added some orange, and now I'm going to add yellow to like the bottom half. And where the orange and the yellow meet is where you'll do some of that blending. And I kind of like to push some of my yellow up and then bring some of that orange down so it really gets that blended look. Go ahead and finish your tree tops that you have at the bottom. Make sure they are fully painted in or colored in, whatever material you're using, and make sure you have at least 2 colors mixed and blended in with the tree tops. Once you're done with that, go ahead and come back, and we will finish up by doing the tops of your trees or mountains and the sky. Perfect. I hope your tree tops are turning out gorgeous. I think they're so beautiful. They're so much fun to do. Okay, so you have your tree tops done. We have our rocky mountainside cliff thing done. We have our waterfall almost done. And now we're going to do our top part. So remember, you want to use, you know, those 2 different colors. So you could go with like maybe a yellow at the top, and you're going to push it down and then blend it in with, let's say, some green. And then there you go. Look, I got my 2 elements. It kind of created a light green when I blended it together. So go ahead and paint in the top part. And then for the sky, after you've done this, again, try and use your 2 colors. It's fun for the sky to do, like, you spread some blue around in a few of the areas. Just kind of throw in some blue there. And then I go in with my purple. And I kind of blend my purple into the areas where I didn't add the blue. And it really gives the sky just like a beautiful color blend. Maybe you want to do a sunset. So you want to have like the purples and the pinks and what else? Like the oranges. You can do that. It doesn't have to be necessarily a blue sky. That's up to you. Okay. So So make sure you've really colored painted everything in all the way to the edges. I don't want to see, you stop here and you have this random white corner. Go ahead and get all the spaces in. Once you are done with the sky and the tree or mountain tops, go ahead and come back, and we're going to talk about how we can add some of the water spray towards the bottom. Then we're almost done. Alright, so now you're pretty much done. We just got one thing. So on the picture, on the assignment page, I'll try and zoom in right here. You'll see that there's some white elements added to the bottom of the waterfall. So like when the waterfall crashes and then you kind of get that water spray and it looks, kind of white and bubbly, that misty spray that comes off when the water hits the bottom or the rocks or the river, whatever's at the bottom of the waterfall. Now there's a couple different ways to do this. If you have access to white paint, you can go ahead and use the white paint and add some of those elements at the bottom. If you don't have white paint, which is fine, you can take like a white pastel or white crayon or something like that, and you can go in and add some of those little strokes or little white sections. You can kind of curvy them up or make little curvy dash lines to just kind of give that white water element. So I'll zoom it in a little bit. So you can see I kind of put some of those little lines. Now, some of you may have access to the white paint, which is great. So I'll show how to do that too. You can take your paintbrush with the white and you can kind of dab on the white paint, or a really fun way to get that spray effect is if you get like a thicker white paint or you put a lot of white watercolor, you can kind of flick the paintbrush so that you're taking the edge and you are pulling it back and you're flipping it so it's kind of splattering or spraying. So I don't have a thick white paint today, so I'm going to have to improvise or problem solve, and I really want to try and get a lot of white watercolor on my paintbrush. So see how you can really see the white. And I'm not going to do the whole thing. I'm just going to do kind of the bottom. And again, you can add the textures by doing like a little dabbing motion right there at the bottom. If you were to have like that thicker white paint and you do the spray, you'll be able to see the white a little bit more, but I don't have thick white paint, so I'm just improvising or problem solving. So now I've added a little bit of that white water spray element. Okie dokie. Okay, so make sure you've added that little white spray element. Remember, you can use your white pastel to add it, white crayon, white watercolor, maybe if you have the thick tempera or acrylic white paint, you can kind of splatter it on. There's lots of different ways, remember, you can complete this project. All right, we are done. Congratulations, all the hard work has paid off. You're now sitting in front of a beautiful masterpiece. Remember, you need to take a picture or a video. If you're doing a video, remember to hold it straight on and into the camera close enough so that I can see the whole picture and all of the details. It makes it a bit tricky on my part if you're holding the picture really far away from the camera or you have it off to the side and I'm trying to grade it and I can't see it. So go ahead and make sure you have all of your components. You've added at least your 1, 2, 3, 4 horizontal lines. You have added at least 3 tree tops. You've added your curvy, zigzag, jagged line for like your mountain or treetop. You have painted in each section of the waterfall separately, which means you're starting from the bottom of a section and working your way up. You're leaving that little space at the top of each section because it's as if you're going down the waterfall, right? So this is coming down and spraying. This part is coming down and hitting the rock, right? So then it sprays and then the water goes over, and you really give that sense of movement. You've painted in all of the different components. Remember, for your trees, your tree tops and your rocks, and your sky, you want to use at least 2 different colors to blend together. I don't want to see any flat color on those things. And then lastly, you definitely want to make sure you've added in those oil pastel movement, which is, you're using your lines. So I have my squiggly lines for my waterfall. I have some of those curvy lines or the C-shaped lines for my tree. I got my curve and L lines for kind of my rocks, and my jagged lines for the tops of the trees or the mountains. Once you've double checked the grading rubric and you have everything and you are satisfied the entire project is completed correctly, go ahead, take a picture or a video and submit it for a grade. Remember, I will leave a comment or feedback if you forgot to add an element. And many of the times I will not give you a full grade, or I will mark it as missing. So just double check that once you've turned it in, that either I have graded it completely, or check to see if you have any feedback and fix the errors and then resubmit. You can always resubmit a project if you are missing components, okay? I don't have it where you can't do that. Please make sure you follow all of the directions and you try your best to get it turned in on time. Okay, I'm super excited to see the different landscapes. I think they're going to be super beautiful. And then I always encourage